Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 563. I had the white pieces and started off with knight f3. Thinking to play a Reti setup or perhaps just go into an English. My opponent replied symmetrically with knight f6, and for a while I think we're getting into a symmetrical English. He goes with g6, a Fianchetto setup, and I go with g3. So very typical English system kind of moves, English opening moves. He goes bishop g7, I go bishop g2. I could, of course, transpose back into a queen's pawn opening with d4, which is something that happens later and can often happen with the English. He plays a rare move here, so just continuing with the c5 would signal that he wants to play the symmetrical English. Or castling, it's kind of a flexible move, leaves his options open and is the top choice here. But he went with d6, so clearly going for a King's Indian type of setup. So I went knight c3. d4 immediately could be played. I didn't play it here, but already, yeah, playing d4 with the idea of transposing into a King's Indian is probably a reasonable move here. Knight c3 is okay though. He castles, and then here I go in with d4. And so we really have transposed into a King's Indian, although I haven't committed the e-pawn just yet. So there's different kinds of setups that are possible from here. He goes with knight c6. Knight bd7 is also a move, or c6, or c5 even. So a lot of different ways for black to play, and I think black has a reasonable position here. He goes with knight c6, and I go with e4 immediately. It's actually a bit of a mistake. I should really castle here. It shows what happens when you get into a position from an unusual move order. You kind of miss up. You may miss some little nuances that are sort of taken care of for you automatically if you've got a particular sequence that you're playing out. But if you get into a position from an unusual move order, then you need to pause and think. And e4 is just not quite correct. So he goes with e5, which is the right way to challenge this, and we'll show the problem in a little bit. I pushed on with d5. And the thing is, right here, he can jump in with the knight to d4, which is not normally possible. And it all has to do with the exposed king. So let's take a look at this little sequence. I mean, it's kind of deep. This is why it's good to know the openings, because you can fall into these sequences and not realize that things are going wrong until many moves down the road. So naturally, just trading that off and getting rid of the pawn seems like the thing to do. But, now you may start to realize that there's a problem. And the reason why I needed to castle earlier, black can just grab a pawn here. And he's attacking my queen, and he's gotten his pawn back. I need to retreat my queen somewhere. If I take, I just get skewered on the open e-file. So what to do here? Actually, queen takes e4 is the best move. I need to move the queen somewhere. If I just drop back to d1, what happens here? Knight takes c3, opening this e-file with tempo, bishop takes, and then bishop takes here, check. I thought it was going to be having to do with the d-file, but it also has to do with this c3. The fork on c3. So that would have been a big disaster if the game had gone that way. Here, let's get back to that position in the game. It was right here, right when I played e4. It just seemed like a natural move to get into that King's Indian setup, but I really need to castle first in this particular case. Now, of course, I showed a worse case, but it seems like black can equalize after e5. And I played d5. He hops his knight into d4. The point is, I can't really take that. Well, it says I can take it. I guess I just can't take the pawn back. But maybe I should avoid taking it. If I just castle here, am I okay? Get away from that fork idea? Yeah, it seems like bishop g4, and yeah, black has a very active position with pressure on the knight on f3. Yeah, so just e5 right in this particular position, e4 rather. Right here is a mistake, and he plays the correct first move. He played e5, I played d5, but then he just retreated the knight to e7. He played this move, and after that we're back in normal King's Indian territory. I castle here, And you see that's the... Oh, I should castle here. Get away from some of these tactics. I played bishop to g5. Okay, this is still all right. He goes knight e8 here. We're just out of the opening book, so let's look at what's going on. And now, once again, I should probably castle, but I was thinking about this exchange over here on h6. Not bad just yet. He goes f5. And once again, I can castle here, or I could take the pawn. Let's see. I was curious about this pawn take scenario, because usually when you take the pawn, black will take back with the pawn and then keep control over these center squares, and this is sometimes pretty good for black. Let's say I castle here, and I think it's usually the kind of position the King's Indian player is going for, but the chess engine likes white in this position. Okay, so I guess I could have taken the pawn. Anyway, I went bishop h6 to trade off the bishop. And now he takes, which is the recommended move. And I thought this would be okay because I get a good outpost for this knight. But it can come under some pressure. And now the best way for black to continue, I'm going to trade off this bishop in any case. But he can exchange first and kind of displace my queen, and that kind of minimizes white's advantage here. There's some big follow-up, knight f5 with a tempo on the queen. And the queen drops back to d2, and black is pretty much equalized here. But this is an okay position for both sides. Both sides can play this. He goes knight f5 immediately, so I don't waste a tempo with the queen. And this leaves me with some slight advantage. Let's see, he took back with the knight on e8. And finally I castle. So anyway, next time when you see these kind of positions, remember you're supposed to be castled already before you start doing all this stuff in the center. Bishop d7 and g4, kicking the knight. g4 is kind of a provocative move here, but I wanted to settle the question of what's going on with this knight before he, he's always got this threat of hopping into d4, and I want to be able to trade it off. So this knight is tying down my knight, and so my thought was to kick it away and free up my knight to move, because I want to try and coordinate my knights against his king here, get something going. But this is a bit provocative here, this g4 move, I'll admit it. It's not horrible, though. Okay, so he goes knight to d4 anyway. Yeah, that's what I was hoping to provoke. And now this is good for me. His best way to play this is knight to h4. Which would probably, lead to some simplifications, an exchange of knights. And then I would play h3 to support the pawn. So knight d4, and I'm probably winning at this point, but I don't play this right. I take the knight, that's correct. And then I just grab the pawn immediately, leaving this pawn hanging. And that's just silly. I should support this pawn first. There's no reason to give up my g-pawn, and this pawn is not going anywhere. Very typical kind of situation. You can create this this pawn that can't be defended, and you're going to win it. You just don't have to grab it right away. You make sure that your opponent doesn't have any counter chances first, and here it's simply just a hanging pawn. So I took right away too quickly. A move played too quickly. And now he should just take this pawn, and it's an equal position. But instead he goes for some interesting tactical idea that doesn't quite work out. He tries to pin my knight and at the same time attack this pawn. I just defend the pawn with h3. And now he tries to pile up on the pinned knight. This is logical. Oh no, he tries to undermine the pawns here. So I continue to support the pawn with f3. It's just, his tactics just don't quite work out here. And he could have just grabbed the pawn, so that would have been equal. So once again, I'm back in a winning position here. But, this is not the end of the story, so stay tuned. Let's see. I went f3. He went h4. Well, he's maybe going to try and take advantage of this hole in my position, but it's hard to see how he will get a piece here to really exploit that. But this does limit my options. I can't bring a knight back here, for example. A queen on that square would look pretty good, but of course he has to get rid of my knight first. So, I don't know. I would have probably taken there and tried to open up some lines if I was had the black pieces and I was in an attacking mood. But he's worse in any case. Okay, so I continued with queen to e3 and just unpin the knight. Cancel that queen to e3, unpinning the knight. He goes g5. He's closed up the lines here, so I'm not getting any immediate attack. But I have a pawn extra, and so I should go on to win this game. I guess it's kind of a backwards pawn, and this bishop is kind of trapped. So black has some ideas too. Just not quite working out. Okay, I played b3, shoring up my pawns. It was queen e7. More pressure on the knight. I defend with the a rook. Bring this rook over. He plays rook e8, attacking, and now I go queen to d2, stepping out of the pin. And this knight is adequately defended with the rook and the pawn, and the bishop is behind the pawn even. So there's no real way for for black to crash through on the e-file here. And actually I'm now setting up threats where I have some tempo moves with the knight. I can think of taking some things, although I can't do that. That's not a threat because his queen can take back. Yeah, I would have to get more force on the e-file before that becomes a threat. But there are perhaps some ideas with discovered attacks on the queen by moving the knight. Anyway, he steps out of the way with queen d8. And I go with knight c3, open up that e-file. He pushes on with c5. And I could have taken en passant, but I decide to leave it closed. This advanced pawn is actually pretty good for me. I maybe can get a piece on the e6 square at some point. Let's see. I start with the exchange of rooks here. He takes back with the knight. Cancel that. Takes back with the knight. So that was a top engine choice. So that's a reasonable way to play. And then I get the e-file here. So we're coming up on a key move here. Let's see. He goes knight f6, trying to get his knight back into the game. Yeah, that was it. Okay. So his next move is knight f6. And after that, I have a tactic. And I mentioned this in the description of the video. So you have to imagine the move knight f6 from black, and then it's white's turn to move. And what's a good tactic there? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. Yeah, knight f6 has trapped his knight. Trapped his rook. This rook has no squares to go to. Can't retreat, and can't go sideways because of I can play the move knight e2. This is the idea I missed. I'm attacking the rook and guarding the only square it might escape to, and all the other squares are protected by my pawn. So that rook is just a goner. So yeah, always keep your eye out for these piece traps. They crop up quite a bit, and people tend to overlook them. But also when you're playing, you should notice that a move like knight f6 is restricting the mobility of your rook, and that should be one of the things you check. Is is there a trap possible when you see one of your pieces with limited mobility? Okay, so I missed that idea. I was still thinking about getting my knight back to a good square. Although actually it had just come off of c3, so I just kind of had gone back and forth. But I guess I was challenging his knight. And I'm okay with some exchanges here. See, he trades, and it does keep an advantage. But really, when you have a move like that, you should just play it. You should notice it, and you should play it. So that's my bad. Let's see. He comes in here with queen f6, and right here is where I actually give away the advantage and let him back in the game. So I've had an edge in this game for quite a while, but there's really only one move that keeps the maximum edge here, and it's not so obvious. So let's go ahead and play this move, e5. I thought he would just take this pawn, so I really didn't consider this variation at all. But if he takes, there's this clever queen move here, queen a5, the chess engine finds. This is a nice move, queen a5 here, threatening the back rank maybe in some lines, and threatening a pair of pawns. And that square on the back rank is covered by his queen right now. But it's a good active post for the queen. Now the other place the queen could go besides a5 is e3. So let's take a look at this. It's just threatening to win back the pawn. It's hard to see what the big advantage is here. Queen takes e5. You know what the big advantage is here is now I've got this passed pawn which is protected. So that's a tremendous edge for the endgame. And if we back up, I was just talking about pawn structures. In this pawn structure, this is a backwards pawn. And so in these kind of situations, you should always be looking for ways to dissolve it. And if I can advance that pawn and trade it off, I've gone from a situation like this where I have a backwards pawn to this situation where I have a protected passed pawn. So the material is even, but this is a much more powerful pawn right now. So that's the way to go. Let's see, what did I play? I played Queen E2. And, I was thinking of pushing this pawn, but now he blockades, and it's not so easy for me to advance that pawn. So let's go on a few moves. I trade off some pieces. We'll see the evaluation has gone to completely even and stays this way. He's got this blockade on my pawn. He's got lots of checks that he can give me on the back rank, and this really should end in a draw. And so he bounces around with his queen, that's right, until this point. Let's back up. He played Queen G3 right there. That was the move. He gave away his G-pawn for no particular reason, and it's safe for me to take it. Maybe he thought it wasn't safe for me to take that pawn, but I can grab it and it's with check. So that's why it's safe for me to grab that pawn. So when he comes in here with Queen G3, suddenly he's gone from having a draw to losing once again. So I grab this pawn with check. King runs to F7, and then there's I think I keep the edge from here on out. Let's see, I bring my queen back to D2, just defending everything. Now I've got 2 extra pawns, and like I said, this one, similar to what I was saying before, this one is a protected pass pawn. It's a big threat for the endgame. He sacrifices his bishop to get rid of it, but the tactics here don't work out for black. He was probably, actually I was expecting him to play H3 here and try and win my bishop back. But I realized later that after that exchange, this piece, these 2 pawns become menaces. So for example, here he attacks my bishop. Queen F2 check. Yeah, I can just force a trade of queens. He takes, I take. He can take the bishop. I take back. But this is a winning king and pawn endgame. I have a passed pawn here. And I have an extra pawn over here if this one fails for some reason. So he decided not to go that route, I guess, and took the pawn instead, but now he's just down a piece. And I think it's a pretty routine win. I go for the checks anyway. I just want to trade queens and get into this endgame where I'm a piece up. And I don't blow it. There's a little bit of maneuvering. Notice that the bishop is placed here, and it can go back and forth on this diagonal, keeping this pawn from advancing, and his king runs out of moves. So he can move some pawns, but in the end nothing much is happening. I can just keep waiting by moving the bishop back and forth, and then with those extra tempos I can force his king back, and he resigned at this point. I'm just going to come over and munch those pawns. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.